We meet this morning to continue to receive testimony on the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy on gays in the military. The Secretary of Defense testified before this committee on February 2nd that he supported the President's decision to work with Congress to repeal the law known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and said that, quote, "The question before us is not whether the military prepares to make this change, but how we best prepare for it." At the same hearing, Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, expressed his personal belief that allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly would be the right thing to do. He said, quote, "No matter how I look at this issue, I cannot escape being troubled by the fact that we have in place a policy which forces young men and women to lie about who they are in order to defend their fellow citizens. For me personally," he said, "it comes down to integrity. Theirs as individuals and ours as an institution." Today, we will hear testimony from witnesses who do not represent the Department of Defense, although each of them has served with distinction in the military. We welcome General John Sheehan, United States Marine Corps, retired. While on active duty, General Sheehan served in various command positions, ranging from company commander to brigade commander in both the Atlantic and Pacific theater of operations. General Sheehan's combat tours included duty in Vietnam and Desert Shield, Desert Storm. His last assignment was as Supreme Allied Commander, Atlantic, and Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Atlantic Command. In the latest Gallup poll, the American public overwhelmingly supports allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly in the military. 69% of Americans are recorded as supporting their right to serve, and many gays and lesbians are, in fact, serving in our military. As former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General John Kashvili, who supports ending the policy, has pointed out, a majority of troops already believe they serve alongside gay or lesbian colleagues. It's hard to know for sure, but one recent study estimated that 66,000 gays and lesbians are serving today, forced to hide their orientation, at a constant risk of losing the chance to serve. Supporters of the current Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy argue that allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly would damage unit cohesion and morale, crucial factors in building combat effectiveness. But there's no evidence that the presence of gay and lesbian colleagues would damage our military's ability to fight. Gay men and women are serving now, and their fellow service members often know that they are serving with them. Their service is not damaging unit cohesion and morale. Senator Lieberman has introduced the Military Readiness Enhancement Act of 2010, of which I am co-sponsor, that would replace the current policy concerning homosexuality in the armed forces with a policy of non-discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. I hope we can move quickly and deliberately to maximize the opportunity for all Americans to serve their country. We can and should do that in a way that honors our nation's values while making us more secure. Mr. Almy, should somebody be forced to be silent about their sexual orientation in the military?
In my opinion, no, Senator. I think the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law is inherently in conflict with the service's core value, as Admiral Mullen reflected in his testimony before this hearing a month ago. The principal core value of the Air Force is integrity first, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell says that gays and lesbians can serve in the military as long as they're not who they are, as long as they lie about who they are. And to me personally, that was in direct violation of the core values of the Air Force.
So while you were willing to keep that your orientation private, you don't feel it is the right policy or a fair policy. Is that correct?
Correct, Senator.
Now, would you like to return to the military if you could?
Absolutely. It's my greatest desire. It's my calling in life, and I miss the military considerably.
General, you've been a NATO Supreme Allied Commander, And I assume that as NATO commander that you discussed the issue with other military leaders of our allies. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
Did you, or did they tell you, those allies who allow open service of gay and lesbian men and women, did they tell you that they had unit cohesion or morale problems?
Yes, sir, they did. And if you don't beg the indulgence.
Sure.
Most of this committee knows that current militaries are a product of years of development. They reflect societies that they're theoretically paid to protect. The European militaries today are a product of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Nations like Belgium, Luxembourg, the Dutch, etc., firmly believed there was no longer a need for an active combat capability in the militaries. As a result, they declared a peace dividend and made a conscious effort to socialize their military. That included the unionization of the militaries. It included open homosexuality demonstrated in a series of other activities with a focus on peacekeeping operations because they did not believe the Germans were going to attack again or the Soviets were coming back. That led to a force that was ill-equipped to go to war. The case in point that I'm referring to is when the Dutch were required to defend Srebrenica against the Serbs. The battalion was under strength, poorly led, and the Serbs came into town, handcuffed the soldiers to the telephone poles, marched the Muslims off, and executed them. That was the largest massacre in Europe since World War II.
Did the Dutch leaders tell you it was because there were gay soldiers there?
It was a combination.
Did they tell you that? That's my
Yes.
question. They did.
They included that as part of the problem.
That there were gay soldiers
That
among
the
the Dutch folks.
combination was the liberalization of the military, a net effect of basically social engineering.
You said that no special accommodation should be made for any member of the military.
Sure.
Are members who are straight, who are heterosexual, allowed in our military to say that they are straight and heterosexual? Are they allowed to say that without being discharged?
Are they allowed to declare the sexuality?
Yeah, they allowed to say that, hey, I'm straight, I'm heterosexual. Can you say that without being discharged?
There's no prohibition to my knowledge.
Is that special accommodation to them?
I wouldn't consider a special accommodation.
Why would it be a special accommodation into someone who's gay to say, hey, I'm gay? Why do you call that special? You don't call it special for someone who's heterosexual or straight. Why do you believe that's a special accommodation to somebody who is gay?
I think the issue, Senator, that we're talking about really hasn't a lot to do with the individuals. It has to do with the very nature of combat. Combat is not about individuals, it's about units. We're talking about a group of people who declare openly sexual attraction to a particular segment of the population and insist on continuing to live in the intimate proximity with them.
But
That by law.
You allow that for heterosexuals. You
Yes.
don't have any problem with that.
Don't have a problem with that.
You don't have any
But
problem
that-
with men and women serving together even though they say that they're attracted to each other.
That's correct.
That's not a special accommodation.
No.
Okay. But it is special to
It
allow.
is because it identifies a group as a special group of people who by law make them ineligible for further service.
But the whole issue is whether they ought to be ineligible, whether we ought to keep out of, from our
That's
service.
the debate. The current law clearly says,
You know, I know what the law says. The question is whether we ought to change the law.
my recommendation is no.
But, no, I understand. And can you tell us what Dutch officers you talked to who said that Srebrenica was in part caused because there were gay soldiers in the Dutch army?
Chief of Staff of the Army who was fired by the Parliament because they couldn't find anybody else to blame.
And who was that?
Hank von Brummen.
Pardon?
Hank von Brummen.
why is the burden to end a discriminatory policy based on people who would end the discriminatory policy? Why do you say that people who want to end the policy have to show that it would improve combat effectiveness if we're satisfied it would not harm combat effectiveness? And for many who would be allowed to serve, that they would be then permitted to serve without discrimination and without harm. Why is that not good enough for you?
Because the force that we have today is probably the finest fighting force in the world.
And maybe we could have an equally fine or even a better force. But if it's
I think
equal,
the
if it's
burden of-
equally fine, if you could be satisfied that there would be no harm to combat cohesion or effectiveness, would that be satisfactory to you?
No, I think it has to be demonstrated, Senator,
That there be an actual improvement?
that we are an actual improvement.
No,
The reason-
no harm wouldn't be good enough for you?
No. The reason
Pardon?
the reason I say that, Senator, is because we've gone through this once before during our lifetime. You were in the Senate at the time. It was called the Great Society, when it was deemed that we could bring into the military Category 4s and 5s and help the military out and make it part of a social experiment. Those Category 4s and 5s almost destroyed the military.
I don't know what that has to do with this issue.
Well, it has to do with the issue of being able to demonstrate that the change in policy is going to improve things. We were told that this is going to help out combat strength, combat deployable strength. It didn't. It did just the opposite. It drove people out. So I think the burden has to be on demonstrating that something is going to become better, not hoping that it'll become something better.
Well, I think the burden to maintain a discriminatory policy is on the people who maintain the policy, not on the people who want to end it.